I still remember the exact sound of the door closing that night. It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, it was final. A quiet click, followed by a silence so deep it felt like the walls were holding their breath. That's how 15 years of marriage ended for me. Not with a fight, not with screaming or shattered dishes, just silence. She walked out of our home, carrying a small suitcase, her favorite blue scarf around her neck, and that look in her eyes. Not of guilt, not even of sadness, just emptiness, like she had already left me long before her feet did. I stood there in the doorway for a long time, staring at the space she had just walked out of. The rain had started to fall, soft and cold, tapping against the roof. It was almost poetic, like the sky was crying because I couldn't dot my name's Aaron. I used to think I was a good husband, the kind who listened, worked hard, brought home flowers once in a while, remembered birthdays, and loved deeply. But that night, all of that meant nothing, because sometimes love isn't enough. She said she needed to find herself, that she felt trapped, 15 years together, and now she needed to find herself. I remember laughing, not because it was funny, but because it was the only thing I could do to stop myself from breaking down. Find herself, what about us? What about me? But she didn't turn around. She didn't even flinch. That was the moment I realized I was already gone from her heart. The next few days were a blur. You know that feeling when everything around you looks normal, but it all feels like it's been drained of color. That's how my world looked. Her clothes were gone. The kitchen looked emptier. The coffee mugs she loved, the ones with silly quotes on them, sat untouched. Even the smell of her perfume started fading from the bedroom sheets. 15 years, erased. I didn't tell anyone right away. I went to work, forced a smile, and acted like everything was fine. But every evening, I'd come home to silence. And in that silence, my mind would torture me with memories. The way she'd hum while cooking, the way she'd rest her head on my shoulder during movies, the way she used to say, "You make me feel safe." Safe. What a strange word that became. Because, in the end, she didn't want safety. She wanted excitement, freedom, something new, and I was stability, the thing people crave until they get it, then start to resent. Weeks turned into months. I tried calling her a few times in the beginning. She never answered. Then one day, she finally texted, "Please don't call. I need time. I hope you understand." Understand? No, I didn't understand. How could I? I gave her everything I had, my best years, my heart, my trust. But maybe that's where I went wrong. Maybe I gave her too much. Maybe she wanted to see if someone else could make her feel alive again. You see, that's the cruel part of love. When you give it all, you assume it'll be enough. But sometimes, your all is just too much for someone who's already dreaming of a different life. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove around the city, aimlessly, passing all the places we used to go, the park, the bookstore, the little diner by the corner where we had our first date. Every corner whispered her name. Then, I found myself parked outside her sister's house. Her car was there. I just sat there for a while, gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding. Should I go in? Should I knock? But before I could decide, the front door opened, and I saw her. She wasn't alone. There was a man beside her, tall, casually dressed, with his hand on her back, as they laughed about something. That laugh, it used to be mine. My heart dropped, and I swear, for a moment, it felt like time froze. All the air left my lungs. I didn't honk, I didn't shout, I just drove away. And that's the night I disappeared. I packed a few clothes, took some money from my savings, left a note for work saying I needed time off, and drove out of town before sunrise. No destination, no plan. Just gone. Sometimes, running away isn't about escaping someone, it's about trying to find the pieces of yourself they left behind. I drove until the city lights turned into open roads and endless trees. Somewhere past the state border, I stopped at a small, quiet town, the kind of place where everyone knows each other's names. I found a cheap cabin for rent near a lake and moved in the same day. The owner, an older man named Harold, didn't ask questions. He just handed me the keys and said, "You look like someone who needs peace." He was right. The first few weeks were strange. I wasn't used to silence, real silence, the kind without phone buzzes or traffic outside. It forced me to think, to feel. Some nights, I'd sit by the lake, watching the reflection of the stars in the still water, and I'd think about her. Was she happy? Did she ever miss me? Or was I just a chapter she closed without looking back? I didn't know, but slowly, something unexpected started happening. The pain, though still there, started to soften around the edges. I began waking up early, making coffee, going for walks in the woods. There was something healing about watching the sunrise over the lake. It made me realize life still moved forward, even when your heart teed. After about 3 months, I started working again remotely this time. Harold owned a small furniture shop, and he asked if I could help him design a basic website for online orders. I said yes. It was simple work, but it kept me busy. And for the first time in years, I felt useful without pressure. Harold and his wife, Margaret, treated me like family. They never asked too much about my past, but they could see the pain in my eyes. Margaret once told me, sometimes the people we love the most are just lessons in disguise. That stuck with me. One evening, while helping Harold fix an old chair in his workshop, he asked quietly, "So, what's her name?" I paused, then smiled weakly. "It doesn't matter anymore." He nodded. "It will. Someday it won't hurt to say it out loud." And he was right again, because pain doesn't vanish. It transforms. It becomes quieter, deeper, something you learn to carry rather than fight. The months rolled into a year. I started journaling, writing down my thoughts, my regrets, the lessons I'd learned. I realized that I wasn't just healing from her leaving, I was healing from the version of myself that forgot how to live without her. For 15 years, I was half of something. Now, I was learning to be whole again. There were moments when I still missed her. A song would play, or I'd see a woman wearing her perfume, and for a second, my heart would ache. But then, I'd remind myself she made a choice, and I made mine. I chose peace. One cold autumn morning, I was walking by the lake when I saw a small dog limping near the edge of the water. He was skinny, scared, shivering. I knelt down slowly and offered him a piece of bread from my pocket. He hesitated, then took it. I named him Milo. From that day on, he followed me everywhere. He became my silent companion. No questions, no judgments, just quiet loyalty. In some way, Milo reminded me what unconditional love looks like. Not the kind that demands or leaves, just the kind that stays. By the second year, my life had completely changed. I wasn't the broken man who had driven out of the city that night. I had built something new, a small business helping local shops with their online presence, a few new friends in town, and a peace I'd never known before. Sometimes, I'd think of her, wondering where she was, if she ever thought about me. But the ache was softer now. It didn't burn, it just lingered quietly, like an old scar that only hurts when it rains. And then, one morning, everything changed again. It was early spring. I had just finished walking Milo and was about to make coffee when I heard a knock on the cabin door. Nobody really visited me that early, so I was surprised. I opened the door and froze. It was her. She looked different, thinner, tired, her eyes swollen like she hadn't slept well for days. But I'd know that face anywhere. For a moment, we just stared at each other. I didn't know what to say. Neither did she. Then she whispered, almost trembling, "Hi, Aaron." My heart felt like it forgot how to beat. I stepped aside wordlessly, letting her in. She looked around the cabin, the simple furniture, the books, the photos of the lake. Then her eyes landed on Milo. "You got a dog," she said softly. "Yeah," I replied. "He doesn't leave." She gave a sad little smile. "Good. You deserve someone who stays." That line hit me harder than I expected. We sat across from each other in silence for what felt like forever. I finally asked, "Why are you here?" She looked down at her hands. I didn't know where else to go. I won't lie, a part of me wanted to scream, to tell her she had no right to show up after disappearing for 2 years, after walking out like our life together meant nothing. But another part of me, the part that still remembered her laughter, her warmth, her dreams, just looked at her and saw pain. And despite everything, I couldn't turn her away. She began to talk slowly at first. Then everything came pouring out. She told me she had moved in with that man, that she thought he was everything I wasn't, spontaneous, exciting, unpredictable. But it didn't take long for her to realize she had traded peace for chaos. "He cheated," she said quietly, "multiple times. And when I found out, he said it was my fault, that I was too emotional, too serious, too much." Tears rolled down her face. "I left him 6 months ago. I've been alone since then." I just sat there, listening. Every word hurt, not because I still loved her, but because I once believed I wasn't enough for her. And now, hearing her admit she was wrong, didn't bring satisfaction, only sadness. She wiped her eyes and looked at me. I've thought about you every single day. I've replayed that night in my head 1,000 times. You didn't deserve what I did. I was selfish. I thought I was missing something, but I didn't realize it was you. I didn't say anything. The silence between us was heavy, filled with all the years we lost, all the words we never said. Then she whispered, "Can you ever forgive me?" I looked at her for a long time. Forgiveness. It's such a simple word, but it carries the weight of everything we've ever felt. I didn't know the answer. Not yet, so I said quietly, "I don't know, but you should eat something. You look tired." Her eyes softened, and for the first time in years, she smiled through her tears. That night, after she had fallen asleep on the couch, I sat outside with Milo by my side, staring at the stars. My heart was a storm: anger, confusion, sadness, pity, and something else I couldn't name. Was this fate giving me a second chance? Or was it testing me to see if I'd repeat the same mistake again? All I knew was this. 2 years ago, I lost everything I loved, but somehow, the peace I found afterward had become my real home. And now, that peace was being tested. When morning came, she was still there, sleeping soundly for the first time in what looked like months. I made coffee, sat by the window, and thought about everything that had led to this moment. Maybe, just maybe, what happened next would decide both of our lives, because when someone throws away 15 years of love, and fate brings them back to your door, you have two choices: rebuild what was broken, or finally, let it rest in peace. The smell of coffee filled the cabin as sunlight slipped through the blinds. She stirred awake slowly, her hair messy, eyes still heavy with sleep. For a moment, I just watched her. The same woman I once thought I'd grow old with. The same woman who shattered me, now sitting in the same room, as if no time had passed. "Morning," she said softly. "Morning." She looked around awkwardly. I didn't mean to fall asleep. "It's fine," I said, handing her a cup. "You looked like you needed it." She took it with trembling hands. "Thank you." Silence again, only the sound of birds outside and Milo's gentle breathing by the door. "Finally," she said, "I didn't know where else to go. I thought you'd hate me." I looked at her. I did, for a long time. Her eyes dropped. "But hate fades," I continued quietly. "Eventually it turns into something else, something emptier." She nodded slowly, her voice almost a whisper. "I deserve that." We spent most of that day talking about everything and nothing, about where she'd been, how she'd lived, and the mistakes she couldn't undo. But I learned that after her affair ended, she tried to rebuild her life in the city, got a new job, rented a small apartment, but she said nothing felt right. "I kept waking up thinking you'd be there," she said, "and when I realized you weren't, I'd tell myself I chose this. But after a while, I couldn't even convince myself anymore." I listened quietly. Every word cut deep, but it also closed wounds that had been open for too long. She asked about me, about the lake, my work, the dog, even Harold and Margaret. I told her bits and pieces, careful not to make it sound like I had built something better without her. But the truth was, I had. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, she asked if she could stay one more night. I hesitated, thought. Old memories flashed through my head, the laughter, the fights, the good and the bad. I didn't want to go back to that place, but I also couldn't throw her out into the night. "Just one night," I said. She smiled faintly, and for a moment, I saw the woman I once loved, not the one who left, but the one who used to make my world feel complete. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I sat outside by the lake, the moon reflecting off the calm water. She came out quietly and sat beside me, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "Do you ever think we could have fixed it?" she asked softly. I took a deep breath. "I think we could have tried, but you didn't give us the chance." "I was scared," she admitted. "You were always so steady, so calm. I thought maybe you didn't need me as much as I needed you." I looked at her, surprised. "You thought I didn't need you. You were my whole world." She blinked away tears. "That's what scared me. I didn't know how to be loved like that. I wanted to feel alive again, and I thought running away would help me find that feeling, but it only showed me what I lost." I didn't respond, because the truth is, sometimes there are no right words, just pain wearing different faces. We sat there in silence for a long time, the lake mirroring the stars above to people who once promised forever, now strangers sharing memories under a cold sky. The next morning, she was still there. She helped make breakfast, fed Milo, even offered to clean the dishes. It was strange, familiar, and foreign all at once. Then she turned to me and said, I want to make it right. I don't expect you to take me back. I need to make peace with you, with us. I studied her face, older, wiser, haunted. She wasn't the same woman who left me for another man. There was humility now, regret. Then start by forgiving yourself, I said quietly. She looked at me, her eyes glistening. And you? I hesitated, then nodded. I'll try. Days passed. She didn't leave. What began as one night turned into a week. She helped around the cabin, took Milo on walks, even visited Harold's shop with me once. Everyone in town assumed she was just a friend visiting. But for me, it was more complicated than that. At first I thought I'd hate having her near, that the old anger would come roaring back, but strangely, it didn't. Instead, I felt calm, maybe because I wasn't the same man anymore, maybe because I no longer needed her to complete me. I had found myself again in her absence, and now, I wasn't sure if I wanted to give that up. One evening, we sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in gold and orange. She turned to me suddenly and said, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I never left?" All the time, I admitted, but maybe we needed to break to see who we really were. She nodded slowly. Maybe. I just wish it didn't take losing you to realize it. She reached for my hand, hesitated, then pulled it back. I didn't move. I just said softly, "You can't undo the past. You can only decide what kind of person you'll be after it." She smiled sadly. "And what kind of person are you now?" I looked at her and said, "Someone who finally learned to be okay alone." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm happy you found that, even if it wasn't with me." And for the first time, she looked genuinely at peace with her own pain. The next morning, she told me she'd be leaving. She said she wanted to find a place nearby, not to intrude, but to rebuild herself properly this time. "I want to earn the right to be in your life again," she said. "Not because of guilt, but because I've changed." I didn't try to stop her. I just nodded and said, "Do what you need to do." Before she left, she hugged me, not a desperate hug, but a quiet one, the kind that says thank you for still seeing me as human. Then, she was gone again, but this time, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like closure beginning to form. Weeks passed, life went on, work, lake walks, Milo's, endless energy. Then one evening, I found a letter on my doorstep, no name on the envelope, just my address. Inside, in her familiar handwriting, it said, "Aaron, I know you might never want me back, and I accept that. But I wanted you to know I'm finally seeing a therapist. I'm volunteering at the shelter, and I'm learning to forgive myself. You once told me love isn't about who stays, it's about who grows. You helped me grow, even in your silence. Thank you for not shutting the door when I came back." I read it twice, then folded it gently, and kept it in the drawer beside my bed. It didn't make me cry, it made me breathe, because sometimes, closure isn't a conversation, or a reunion. It's knowing the other person finally understands what they destroyed. A year passed after that letter. She stayed true to her word. She rebuilt herself quietly. We saw each other occasionally around town. A wave, a small smile, nothing more. There was no bitterness anymore, no resentment, just mutual respect between two people who had walked through hell and came out on different sides. I started writing again, turned my journal entries into small stories about heartbreak and healing. One of them even got published in a local magazine. Harold called it Therapy with Ink. He was right. Writing helped me understand that love doesn't always end where it breaks. Sometimes, it just transforms into something less visible, but more meaningful. One evening, almost 2 years after she'd shown up at my cabin door, I received a call from her. She sounded nervous. "Can we talk?" I agreed. We met at the small cafe by the lake, the same spot I used to sit alone when I first moved there. When she walked in, she looked different, brighter, free. "I wanted to tell you something," she said, sipping her tea. "I'm moving." "Where to?" "Back to the city. My company offered me a good position. It feels like the right step." I smiled. "That's great." She nodded, eyes glistening. "Before I go, I just wanted to say thank you for not letting anger define us, for giving me a chance to heal, even if it wasn't together." I looked at her for a long moment. "You don't owe me thanks. We both did what we had to do." She reached across the table, placed her hand over mine. "Do you think we'll ever find our way back?" I took a deep breath. "Maybe, but if not, that's okay too, because what we had, for all its flaws, was real." She smiled, a single tear slipping down her cheek. We hugged goodbye. not as lovers, not as exes, but as two souls finally at peace with the story they shared. When I watched her drive away, I didn't feel the same emptiness as before. I felt gratitude for the lessons, for the pain that became strength, for the silence that taught me who I really was. Because sometimes, the people who break you are the same ones who show you how to rebuild differently. Months later, I found myself sitting by the lake again, Milo resting beside me, notebook in hand. The air was calm, the water still, a perfect mirror of everything I'd become. I wrote the last line of my story that night. She threw away our 15-year marriage, but in doing so, she gave me something she never could, the chance to find myself. I closed the notebook, smiled, and whispered to the wind, "Thank you." The wind carried it across the water, and in that quiet, I finally understood love doesn't always need a happy ending to matter. Sometimes, it just needs an ending that teaches you how to start again. So if you've ever lost someone who meant the world to you, and you think your life ended there, trust me, it didn't. It's only beginning in a way you can't yet see. And maybe, just maybe, years from now, you'll look back like I did and realize their leaving wasn't your ending. It was your awakening. Don't forget to watch more stories like this.